Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jessie Cofield holding it down for us in the Boston studios here. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review, leave us that 5-star rating. Check us out live on DraftKings, YouTube, DraftKingsNetwork.com, and Samsung TV Plus from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. Dad and I are back in our respective battle stations in South Bend, in Los Angeles. We'll get to Jessie out in Boston as well. And Dad, you've managed to overcome a bevy of technical difficulties to get here this morning, so I'm really proud of you.
Yeah, well, luckily you had everything kind of plugged in the way it was supposed to be plugged in. And I don't know if my camera looks weird now. I don't know, but I'm not touching anything. That's what I've learned. I will not touch anything. I will bring your mother down here to mess around with some of these things if need be, but I'm not doing anything. You can see me. You can hear me. To me, that is a monster win, just like we had this weekend with a lot of college football teams.
Man, you're not kidding. We got a great show. We will get to plenty of the upsets. We will talk to Austin Ekeler from the Los Angeles Chargers. I still almost called him San Diego multiple years into this. About the state of running backs, about their upcoming season, Kellen Moore coming over as the offensive coordinator. We'll also talk to Hall of Famer and Seahawks legend Walter Jones about a great initiative that he is a part of, as well as the outlook for the Seahawks season coming up. But Dad, man alive, this weekend in college football, the true week one, we had week 0 the other weekend. Notre Dame and a bunch of others opened the season, but in earnest, it began this weekend. And for some people, it feels like it might have ended this weekend. We had upsets left and right galore, but maybe none bigger than what we had last night as Duke takes down top 10 ranked Clemson. At home for the Duke Blue Devils, Dad. We had the Field Storm. We had Duke's first win against a top 10 opponent in 28 years, the last of which was Clemson in 1989. And it feels like this could prompt some soul searching, Dad, for Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers, because while there's still plenty of time left in the season and their hopes and dreams are still technically on the table, man, the degree of difficulty just went up something crazy.
Yeah, it really did. I mean, they haven't lost this bad to a ACC team since, for over 10, 15 years. I mean, absolutely ridiculous since 2014. So just about 10 years. What we saw was plays Clemson normally makes, Duke was making, right? A couple of blocked field goals, a couple of fumbles in the red zone. That happened against Clemson. Clemson didn't do it. A couple of chunk run touchdowns for Duke, a 44-yarder, a 36-yarder. That's something we're used to seeing Clemson do, is have those chunk plays. They didn't have those. One of Dabo's lines afterward was he felt they won individual battles but lost the mental battles. Well, I mean, you lost some mental battles and you lost some individual battles too, but this was one of those why you don't look at the stats, because they outgained them. They had the statistical better game. Now, neither quarterback had monster numbers in some of the numbers we saw this weekend from some other quarterbacks. And again, this was Cape Klubnik's second start only, so we were wondering what the next iteration of quarterback at Clemson was going to be. So neither one huge numbers, but Leonard, the quarterback for Duke, had the big touchdown run of 44 yards. So it was kind of the role reversal of Clemson not having the big plays and a team being able to have big plays against Clemson. That had to be a bit of a head scratcher for Dabo.
Dad, you mentioned Clemson had more total yards in this game, had more passing and rushing yards in this game, had a better third down percentage, led in time of possession, and only had one penalty to Duke's 7 in this game. Every which way, you're right. If you box score watch this game, you would be baffled at the result. But then you go and look at the outcome, and you see a Duke team, or a Clemson team, that fumbled twice inside of their own 10-yard line, that had 2 missed or blocked field goals in this game, that gave up points every which way. And Dad, it's why when we assess this on the back end, it's difficult, because you could excuse away a lot with that as your thesis, right? Well, look at the freak plays it took to get to this point. Clemson's offense, with Garrett Riley at the helm for the first time this year, actually was able to move the ball decently well between the 20s. They made use of the running backs the way they wanted to. It was the self-described dirt raid instead of air raid that Garrett Riley sold to Dabo Swinney when he talked about this leading up to the season. And yet, Dad, the biggest indictment and the biggest concern seems to be there did not appear to be a massive talent gap between those two teams on the field last night. And part of that's certainly a credit to Mike Elko and what he's done with this Duke team. There is no doubt about that. 9 wins last season. You mentioned Riley Leonard, who's piquing the interest of draft folks. This is not a fluke if you're Duke side. But, Dad, what Clemson's program was and what it is now appear starkly different at the wide receiver spot and the quarterback spot that for so long were dominant and all time for this Clemson program.
Yeah, listen, we were basic. Now, we did say Florida State could be that team this year, but most people were close to handing Clemson the ACC title. A lot of it just, we didn't feel there was the competition to push them. Both of us in our preseason Final Four had Clemson in it, of which we're going to change at some point because we're allowed to. But there isn't that separation anymore. And it was Florida State, and we'll get to that game, that looked like the team with the 4 and 5 stars, the team that was clicking, the team that was hitting on all cylinders. They looked like the team. And I would imagine in the knee-jerk society that we are, people have flip-flopped that, who had Clemson and then Florida State, flop that around to have it Florida State right now. But that's a great point, is we're used to seeing Clemson head and shoulders above everybody else. Now, you're right. I mean, while they won the statistical battles, they lost the game. And it's not like they lost the game by a point. I mean, 28-7. They pretty, by score, got smoked in this game. So, yeah, it is a bit of a head scratcher. And kudos to Duke. We're probably already not talking enough about Duke. And
no, that's fair.
Can they be a surprise this year? We talk about them in kind of a Midland to maybe upper part, more the upper part, depending on how deep you want to go in the ACC. But now all of a sudden, do we have to look at them a little bit differently? This is what we do after week 1. We start to anoint, we start to tear down, and we start to go, wow, maybe this one team is better than we thought.
And it's a good reminder, right, to exercise some restraint in how this goes, right? But I would say this, Duke has earned the right, and I said this before the season talking to a Clemson outlet, if you're sleeping on Duke at this point, that's your own fault, especially inside the ACC, based on what we saw last year. What we know, veterans on the defensive line like DeMarcus May, a coordinator, head coach in Mike Elko, who might not be the down and down out coordinator, but we know has a defensive identity that's going to throw a lot at you, was going to be a good test, we thought, for Clemson last night. And then an offense that, I don't know, shades of Daniel Jones with a quarterback that, listen, may not blow you away with the completion percentage in this game, but made the timely plays with his legs and a couple of timely throws mixed in there as well. And they're going to be a live dog going into this year. Well, but, Dad, I mean, Clemson's been the face of the ACC. I think that's why this feels so staggering, is because we have not seen them lose like this. Even last year, when the last couple years, really, when you had DJ Uiagalelei in 2021, who was struggling. Last year, you had the back and forth. Cade Klubnik only started 1, but played in 10 games. Even with all that, they've done nothing but win double-digit games. And now is the first time that feels like it could be in legitimate jeopardy after this.
So, they'll get that test. Both teams, let's start with Clemson. You have a Charleston team, you have an FAU team that they should beat, right?
Yeah.
But then it comes to Florida State. Florida State's that big weekend or September 23rd is that big weekend. Florida State, Clemson, Notre Dame, Ohio State, I think Oregon, Colorado. Now we're mentioning Colorado in a big weekend game after Oregon put up, 5,000 points in their win. So that will be a test for Clemson. They'll win their next 2, and then it's like, okay, where are you? You have an ACC loss, but that's going to be the game, because let's be honest, they lose that game to Florida State, they're done, right? I mean, it's tough to believe. Now, 2 losses in a conference, and there's no divisions there now, depending on if everybody else beats each other up, do they get into the title game with 2 losses? But boy, 4 or 5 games into the season, they have 2 losses. That's un-Clemson-like. And then really for Duke, you sit there and look at them, Mike, and you look at them, and they're going to be undefeated facing our alma mater, Notre Dame. They have Lafayette, they have Northwestern, and they have UConn. It's tough to believe. Again, this is for week 1 overreaction things. By the way they played, you would expect them to beat Lafayette, Northwestern, and UConn, which would make them 4-0 for when they play Notre Dame, which will probably be undefeated by then as well. Or well, that'll actually be after the Ohio State game.
That'll be after the Ohio State game. So
we'll see what happens there. But Duke has some tests coming up as well, because we need to start talking about them as well.
Yeah, and I still don't think, based on what we saw last night, that I would consider them in the class with Florida State.
I agree.
Overall,
That's
gonna and Dad, Florida State really rounds into the conversation that I think Clemson fans are going to be having this morning and have had for a while, because when you look at Dabo and this program and the way they've always operated, it's been about culture. Dabo considers them a development program, even with the influx of 4- and 5-star talent that they've had for quite some time now, and has resisted the modern trappings of college football, the transfer portal, and the things that have gone along with it. Dabo and Clemson have only taken 3 transfers in his time there, and 2 of them have been backup quarterbacks. And you look at that in stark contrast to what Florida State has right now. Yes, Jordan Travis, your quarterback, who's at the center of all this, did 1 year at Louisville and then came over, so it hardly qualifies the same, and that was pre the portal that we have now. But, Dad, you look around at the rest of that roster, and you see, especially the offense that we saw this weekend for Florida State. Keon Coleman, the Michigan State transfer. Johnny Wilson, 1 year removed from coming over from ASU. Jaheim Bell, a transfer from South Carolina. On and on down the list, they have gone and they have done what so many others in the upper echelon of college football have done, and that's used the portal to fill holes on their roster, whereas Dabo and company have not. And again, I don't want to go too far off 1 week, because I will say Dabo Swinney has earned the benefit of the doubt when it's come to, over the long course of a season, finding a way to get to double-digit wins. And that MacGyver status has been on display the last couple of years, especially led by a defense that's still incredibly talented. And we saw that on display last night. I am less concerned about them outside of some sloppy tackling on plays like Riley Leonard's long touchdown. So Dabo still does deserve some of the benefit of the doubt. But going into the season, Dad, we had it circled because Clemson have been the poster for continuity along their coaching staff. And now you're dealing with new defensive coordinator after last year when Brent Venables left to go coach Oklahoma, new offensive coordinator in Garrett Riley, who's one of the outside guys that you hired if you're Dabo Swinney, and the decision to not be a portal player in the same way that others are. And all of those happening at once are a big-time experiment that's going on right now in Death Valley, and the early results aren't great.
And listen, if you're a better team, a lot of times you don't need as much help in the portal, but that doesn't mean you don't need help in the portal. And this is where we are. It's the old adapt or die. I'm not saying Clemson is going to die, but you have to have that as part of your game plan now. It can't just be the 18-year-old you sit in the living room of, the 4-star, 5-star to get to come to your school. You've got to now reload. You know, it's not rebuild, it's reload. You have to pick your spots. And as I said, the better you are, you may not have to do an 86-player switch like Deion Sanders did in Colorado, who was coming off 1-11. If you're a better team, you may not need as much help, but you still have to use that. That has to be a tool in the tool belt, and it just doesn't seem like Clemson is ready to throw that in the tool belt just yet.
No, it doesn't appear to, and we'll wait to find out if that's going to end up being a mistake right now. I saw Chris Vanini tweet this last night. Clemson now has lost 3 of its last 4 games, and 4 of its last 7. 3 of those losses were by 3 scores, including last night. So congratulations to Duke. Pulling off the upset. Little football school action. I saw them, Kansas, a number of the football schools end up going out and getting a dub this weekend, but not the only upset by far, and perhaps the biggest game of the weekend, Jessie, in Florida State and LSU now has another coach and another fan base asking some hard questions this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Florida State upsetting LSU in absolute beat-down fashion, 45-24. Really quick, before we jump into that, I do want to say, after Clemson's loss to Duke here, their odds for college football championship there went from plus 1,200 to plus 6,000. So you guys are talking about giving Dabo Swinney, the benefit of the doubt, but the odds makers are certainly not leaning in that direction right now. But yeah, FSU upsetting LSU. I mean, big upset, guys, means a big odds change there, too. So FSU odds before this game, they were plus 2,000. Now they're plus 1,100. LSU odds before the game, plus 2,500. Now they're plus 3,500. So a lot of stuff moving there after this weekend's games. How do we feel about these odds changes, fellas?
Dad, I feel nervous because, as you mentioned, you and I both picked Clemson to represent the ACC in the college football playoff this year. And if we were going to wave a wand and do a do-over, I might, Florida State, and it's not like we put them off on the backside, right? We looked and said of the ACC, it's probably a 2-team conference in Florida State and Clemson as far as who we think could represent in the playoffs. But Dad, when you look at what they were able to do in this game, a rematch of a game that they lost won a year before, but in much closer fashion there off the back of a bunch of LSU bad special teams play. Dad, this time around, this was a good old-fashioned thunder punch to the mouth by this Florida State team. What stood out to you the most in this game?
What stood out to me is the adjustments in the second half. That's what stood out to me. You look at a team at Florida State's down 17-14. They outscore at halftime. They outscore LSU 31-7. And you saw in the first game, their running game was getting stuffed. And remember, we were talking during the game, the amount of athletes on the field for both teams of the big playability or a fumble or a drop pass. Almost every single play is the possibility of somebody taking it to the house on either side of the ball. It was a fun game to watch, sloppy at times for sure. But what Florida State did in the second half by running the ball, they could not get a thing in the first half. Second half, 2 backs, sometimes they have the tight end as an H-back, but they had blocking backs, and they changed it up in the second half and were able to run the ball. You run the ball, now you control the clock. You control the clock, now you get to get receivers even more open on play action pass. And they had 2 great guys. And who was it? Keon Coleman, the kid who came from Michigan State, and Johnny Wilson, who is unbelievable to watch at 6'7". But man, I mean, hang on to the ball. He is a big play one way or the other. He will make a monster play for you, and then a ball will hit him right in the hands, and he'll drop it. But those 2 receivers going with their quarterback and Jordan Travis on what he did, who threw 4 touchdowns in this game. They have some explosiveness on offense, but that running game being successful in the second half, Mike, I think, as you know, as a former old lineman, that running game is going to open up everything else for them, and it did.
Yeah, I think for Florida State and LSU, Florida State's offense versus LSU defensive front, that was really good on really good. Florida State, the biggest improvement under Mike Norvell in this program has been the offensive line, bar none. It's gone from major weakness to legitimate strength now, and they do it by having one thing they do really well. Florida State is going to run counter, meaning they're going to get 2 pullers going and try and create a gap. As well as anybody in college football, they're going to run it early and they're going to run it often. And they've got a quarterback that can help them run it in Jordan Travis, and they've got a great running back in Trey Benson, who didn't have the biggest game in the world, but like you said, timely in the second half. Dad, going up against an LSU defensive front that I think coming off this game is going to be the subject of the biggest question here for them. Yeah. LSU linebacker Harold Perkins was a sensation last year as a freshman, and they've got to move playing off-ball linebacker full-time now in the middle of that defense. And Brian Kelly, their head coach, even talked after the game and said, listen, this is a major change for him. You saw some moments where he was thinking, he was processing, he was going through a bunch of things that are new to him versus just being the guy that had been tasked with largely going after the quarterback last year. And a lot of people disagreeing with his usage there, Dad, and I can understand wanting to put him in the middle of the defense. We saw this with Micah Parsons, a guy who I think is an interesting comp at Penn State, where you had him in the middle because you want him to give him a ton of chances to impact the game. But, Dad, I think there is something to be said for when you've got one of the more unique athletes in the sport, and he is as adept at getting after the passer or hawking down quarterbacks as anyone in the country, you got to give him more opportunities than he had in this game to do that. I think it was 7 pass rush opportunities or something like that he had against this offense that was going bombs away at so many of these big targets in the wide receiver room.
Yeah, without question, Brian Kelly's going to get questioned about that. And certainly the way his defense gave up rush yards in the second half. I mean, this is LSU coming off playing in the SEC championship game. Was supposed to be the next step. Now, they did lose to Florida State by a point last year on a blocked extra point and made it to the SEC championship game. But I think a lot of people feel a little more shaky this year that it should have been a better start for them. And Florida State won their game last year against LSU and then kind of bottomed out during the season, where the expectation now is flipped for Florida State being that team.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. A lot went down in college football over the weekend. All right. Could you even believe what Deion Sanders pulled off? I certainly couldn't. Also, after that huge win, we had some Heisman odds changing here. Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders' Heisman odds went up plus 4,000. Colorado championship odds, they went from plus 20,000 to plus 10,000. Guys, I don't think any of us saw that Colorado win coming over TCU. I mean, I thought maybe they would cover the spread here, but definitely not going to be underestimating Colorado anytime soon.
Well, Jessie used the operative term right there. It's do you believe now? That was the question Deion Sanders was asking everybody after this game. And Dad, it's hard to say no at this point. Now, we can talk about what that means going forward, because 1 week doesn't make a season. But man, did it make an impression. What was yours with Colorado coming off week 1, Dad? Because I look at this team that I thought was going to be due for the under on their win total of, 3.5, whatever you saw, had all the roster overhaul there. I saw a team that not only was explosive on offense, Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, we're not going to be able to say enough good things about what those guys did over the course of this game, especially Travis Hunter's two-way performance. But Dad, overall, this was an extremely disciplined and prepared football team in some of the most unique circumstances we've ever seen in the sport. And for that, Deion Sanders and company, I think, deserve even more credit than they're getting right now.
So much to this narrative, right, of Deion and coaching, and nobody believed. And you heard him in his post-game presser. He's got receipts, called out one of the writers out there. I read your stuff, So he's holding on to that, and that's what he's using. So let me do an overall thing first before we get to the game. And listen, everybody finds something to use as a chip. And this is what Deion's doing. And listen, he has proved it. He is proving it, I should say, right now. But using the, no one believes, and look, we knew this all along. Deion, nobody was going to believe right off the bat. They just weren't, okay? I mean, we have seen great players come and struggle as coaches. And I know Deion has been successful wherever he's been, but that's been high school and then Jackson State. And make no mistake, he was great at Jackson State, phenomenal, then made the jump to the Power 5 to a team with the worst roster basically in the country, and he overhauled it by 86 players. So for anybody to sit there and say, oh, yep, they're going to be in the hunt for the conference title, I believe, and that's just not going to happen. It was going to have to be proved on the field. And that's the thing he did in game 1, him and his team. So all the kudos in the world, and he'll keep using the chip on his shoulder. And I get it. It's fine because it can work, because he's got the players buying in, and that's the bottom line to everything. One of the things he was most impressed about, and me too, 86 player turnover, new team, first game, just 6 penalties. That to me is a real feather in a cap to the coach, the coaches, and the players, to how they're running their business. So we keep hearing about how Deion is running his team. We saw results at Jackson State, and now we saw it in one game against Colorado. So yeah, right now it is definitely working. So you start to come over more to his side to say, okay, his method is working right now. Again, it's game 1, and we'll see where it goes. But man, now all of a sudden people are looking at their schedule going, well, they should beat Nebraska, they should beat this, and then all of a sudden they're matched up against Oregon, who put 81 on Portland State. So already you're talking differently about Colorado because of the way they played. I mean, it was so disciplined, and that's where I'm really giving Deion that credit of building and putting that together, really, I mean, in a matter of a few months, right? From going there and bringing his own Louis Vuitton luggage and changing the team to what they did. So keep using that chip. It's working. I get it. But at the end of the day, just like his play on the field made him one of the greatest ever, even though he was a great talker, it was his play that made him one of the greatest football players of all time. His team's play is what's going to turn all of us to say, oh yeah, man, Deion's got it going on.
Well, I mean, they started that off well. Let's put it this way. Expectations-wise, I don't know where to handicap Colorado now because over the course of a long year, I don't know how depth is going to factor into this. The offensive and defensive lines, when they go up against teams that aren't going to rush 3 as often as TCU did in this game, all that seems secondary to the fact that Colorado's going to be fun this year. Like, as long as they had 5 players go over 100 yards receiving in this game. Or 4 players, go over 100 yards receiving. Dylan Edwards, Travis Hunter, Xavier Weaver, Jimmy Horn Jr. Travis Hunter, Dad, we're going to have to invent new words to talk about that dude in this game here. 11 receptions, 119 yards receiving, 3 tackles, a PBU, and an interception while playing over 120 snaps in that Texas heat that we heard all about during the broadcast, Dad. That's as fluid an athlete as you'll see on the college football field all year long. And what I loved most about him, Dad, is in the midst of making jaw-dropping interceptions, incredible jump ball plays down the field for his quarterback, he got up and had something to say for TCU and their players after every single snap. And that, to me, is indicative of the level of conditioning of that athlete. Because, Dad, you and I were both not big smack talkers because both of us were way too fat to talk smack and then have to go back and back it up. Travis Hunter apparently is truly taking the term built different to new heights.
Yeah, listen, we had to suck in air just to make it to the next play. This guy is amazing. You're right. Talk about fun to watch. With, I believe it ended up being like 126 plays, as you mentioned. I mean, that you don't see that anymore, especially in Power 5. You don't see that. And again, this is the norm from Deion for him because that's what he's seen. So as we see it, and as we see it be successful, as we talked about, we start to buy in a little more. Between that, I love the story with Dylan Edwards, who caught the little swing pass from Deion Sanders and went 46 yards for basically the winning score. Deion coached this kid in Little League football. I love that stuff. You know, I love the fact that he's known that kid that long, coached him when he was a youngster, and now is coaching him, you know, at a Power 5. It's just, there's some great stories there. And I think it really made people look at more and more, you're clicking on this or that of Deion and when he got there and how he changed things and rubbed some people the wrong way. And the last person in the world that cares is Deion. And I get it because Deion has done things his way his entire life. And all he is, as I said, is one of the greatest to ever do it. So he is secure and confident in his way. And one game into the Power 5, his way, at least offensively, has worked pretty good. Defensively, they gave up a lot of points. And as he even said, it's things you have to work on. But, man, that is coming out of the gate so strong.
It's proof of concept for players who, when he addressed the team in the locker room, he even said, not all of you believed that we could be what we showed on the field today. Part of this is also TCU, right? I think that was a program going through a lot of change there that sort of met Colorado in the middle. You've got a new quarterback here after Max Duggan departs. No more Quentin Johnson. No more Kendre Miller in the backfield. One of your offensive linemen, and Steve Avila, who's a draft pick. Garrett Riley, who we talked about there, as Kendall Briles takes over. There were a bunch of things, but, Dad, there were still NFL dudes on that field for TCU from last year, especially on defense, and Colorado made them look like they were stuck in the mud at certain times. And so I think this Colorado team, if you really put me to it, bowl eligibility now seems like a conversation that would be a legitimate mark of, man, if you hit some top-end success this season and get that team that was 1-11 last year to bowl eligible, what a way to prove concept to everybody else around here. And for Deion Sanders and Travis Hunter, the Heisman buzz is going to be real. Like Deion Sanders, especially as that game went on, looked comfortable. He looked decisive. Travis Hunter, if he can keep this pace up, which I don't know how they're going to manage him going forward because 129 snaps a game probably isn't going to work very well. But, man, if he can get it anywhere near that going forward, Dad, and keep mixing it in like that, it's just something we haven't – I saw someone, I think it was Thor Nystrom on Twitter, likened it to Shohei Ohtani. It's just not something we get to see very often, a player do two things at this level both this well.
Colorado paid Deion Sanders $29 million in his contract, or that's what they offered, and didn't have the money yet to pay him. And they got the boosters and they got the collection to basically pay that. And they're going to have no problem raising money for whatever they need based off one game. I bet some donations are coming in already.
All I can say is thank God Mike Norvell and Florida State went out and had the performance they did, because if not, that was going to be a very uncomfortable Monday and Tuesday morning for some people involved. Coming up next, though, let's get loud. It's our first show of the week, which means it's time to go mic'd up on a Monday, on a Tuesday. You guys get it. Back after this. It's GoJo and Golic. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jessie Cofield still with us in Boston. Great show still coming up. At the top of the next hour, we got Austin Ekeler, the great running back for the Chargers. Hall of Famer Walter Jones going to join us as well in the second hour of the show. So make sure you're hanging out with us on YouTube, DraftKingsNetwork.com. You know all the good places. But right here, right now, it's time to get to some of the best sound we heard over the weekend. It's normally mic'd up Monday, but it's a Tuesday. Just go with it. It's still presented by Wrangler, and we are brought to you by Wrangler. Made for the ride of life. Save 15% on your first Wrangler.com order with promo code GOJO15. That's GOJO15. And, Dad, why don't we start off? We talked about Colorado's upset over TCU this weekend. Let's hear from the man himself in Deion Sanders about his reaction to one of the most historic upsets we saw this weekend.
But guess what? We're going to consistently do what we do because I'm here and ain't going nowhere. And I'm about to get comfortable in a minute. Because guess what? These young men in there right now, they believe. Not all of them believed before, but right now, they came up one by one, twos by twos. Coach, we believe. Now they believe. Now Boulder believes. People in the front office, people in the building, the fans, the students. Now everybody want to believe. I'm good with that. We got room.
I tell you what, we're probably not talking enough about how cool Deion Sanders has made Colorado gear look again. Yeah. We've talked about this a lot with Marcus Freeman, our head coach at Notre Dame, but he goes with the all-white look all the time. Having white as one of the base colors there for Deion, phenomenal. The guy cuts an incredible pro wrestling promo, Dad. Like, them being good is so good overall for college football because Deion is going to continue to be so wildly entertaining, and having results to point to with it is also the interesting challenge now for that team, Dad, going forward. Because you know this, there's two ways this can go. It's either, hey, success can damn you as a team if all of a sudden you believe you've arrived and you don't have to work the same way, or for Deion Sanders now, and coaches live for this. Dad, we see him and Saban in those commercials so often together, and it feels like a lot of the rat poison stuff, a lot of the using the chip stuff, all feels very Saban-esque here. But now it's, hey, you've got your first bit of proof of concept if you're Deion Sanders to go back into that locker room and say, man, all that stuff I told you this offseason about how we're going to prepare and what we're going to do. Deion may say he doesn't believe in culture around the team, but he's clearly set one. And now being able to show your players results, this is what happens when you do things our way. That's a major feather in a coach's cap and something I'm sure he's excited to use at practice this week. It's
one of the best things is you said the term proof of concept, because as he said, and I believe it, there were players that were wondering, okay, this is one of the greatest football players of all time. He had success at Jackson State. He's in the Power 5 right now. He's talking a big game to us. Is this really going to happen? And then it does. And the players are seeing, okay, everything the coaches have put in and told us is now coming to fruition. So that's only going to make these players grow in confidence. So this was a monster game for a team that went through everything from spring game to summer workouts to preseason camp, really not knowing. Deion says he knew, and, I'm sure his sons who know Deion best knew what was coming, maybe not a win like this, but that it was going to be positive throughout. But the rest of the players now do believe. I mean, it's just such a monster thing to actually see when practical application hits that what the coaches were talking about worked. It makes you buy in even more.
And when practical application is your quarterback also setting a Colorado single game passing record with 510 yards and 4 touchdowns, that also instills a lot of confidence in this team. Shout out to that Colorado offensive line too. That was one of the biggest question marks along both lines of scrimmage. And I thought those dudes answered the bell really, really adequately. But this is also about words matching the actions for a coach. And that goes a long way with these players. Jessie, we've got another coach in a different league now getting ready to say some words about his players.
Yeah, we've done all college football so far, but don't forget, GoJo and Golic is going to be live from Kansas City on Thursday. Cannot wait for that. And Lions OC Ben Johnson is saying that they actually might be using the running backs in some interesting ways.
They are yes, they are complementary backs. What Five does well, Gibbs might not do as well, and vice versa, but I think they are both very versatile. So we might use Gibbs in some ways that people don't quite think we might, or Montgomery the same way. So I'm really excited to see what they can do out on the field here this week, but we're going to use them all over the place.
Guys, pretty interesting there. Do you have expectations for Gibbs and Montgomery after a comment like that?
I expect them to go out there and try and wear out the middle of this Chris Jones-less Kansas City D-line on Thursday night. I can tell you that much, Dad. And we knew that when they acquired Jahmyr Gibbs, this was part of the idea. They wanted to lean into an established identity from last year. They didn't go the receiver route in the way that some people thought they might. We know they've got some dudes there in Amon-Ra St. Brown, who was a revelation last year, but they was kneecap biting coming in, and it seems like it's going to be more kneecap biting coming out this year.
But the ability to be versatile with the running backs, as Ben just said there, I mean, to either run them out of the backfield in routes, to put them in the slot in routes, looking for the mismatches that you can with running backs and wide receivers. That's the game now, multiple backs and find the mismatch, whether it's running the ball or passing the ball. So I am excited. I've picked Detroit to win their division. I'm very excited to see what he does with both these backs, but it's particularly in this game, as you mentioned, no Chris Jones. I don't care if he signs today, and he's not going to. He ain't playing in this game. That's coming up in just a couple of days. So they want to take advantage of that middle. If they can get that running game going, how it's going to help the passing game. Everybody's expecting a high-scoring game here, a shootout. We'll see. Sometimes you get that in game one. Sometimes the defenses dominate. But when you don't have that big guy in the middle like Kansas City doesn't have, that's the place to attack. And we know it. And believe me, Kansas City knows it as well. But if they can have success attacking there, think of what those backs can do outside of that, outside the tackles, whether running or catching the ball.
So again, that's going to be one of the teams playing that we see Thursday night at GoJo and Golic kickoff in Kansas City, fueled by Campbell's Chunky. We're very excited to get out there. Jessie, let's get to one last bit of sound of a coach that was a bit less excited about the way things have gone lately.
Yeah, so we had our full slate of college football games with the new clock rules in effect. Obviously, the intent to speed up the games there. Coaches, not sure if it works, and Chip Kelly says he feels like it's just more commercials.
Was it just the situation of the game and everything that prevented you from getting Colin in there?
Yeah, it was, and it's also us learning the new clock rule. I mean, we only ran 60 plays today, and I think, there are other coaches around the country that talked about it. I understand the intent of the rule. They wanted to shorten the games, but I don't know if the games are short. I think the games are the same length. It just seems like there's a lot more TV commercials. So I hope someone made some cash tonight because they didn't watch football, but I guess maybe they're out buying a Chevy or a Burger King or McDonald's or something. So we spent a lot of time on the sideline during TV timeouts today. So
Yeah, I mean, he did not mince his words.
Hey, this isn't changing, right? This isn't going anywhere. They'll try and change some rules on the field to speed up a game because college football games can last forever.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons is, what's never going away is commercials, because commercials brings in money and everybody loves money. So that part of it, Mike, is not going to change.
It also is going to affect both teams the same amount. Like, it's not like someone's getting an advantage here.
Yeah, I mean, really, having called a game now this weekend, the South Carolina-North Carolina game, and watched a bunch of college football, it didn't really change a ton of my experience as a viewer. Maybe I'm not as dialed in because I'm flipping back and forth between 9/11 games and not necessarily sticking around for the commercials the same way as someone who's just watching their team might notice a little bit more. The average number of plays lost, I think, has been somewhere in the neighborhood of like 6 or 7 in a game. I like the fact that the rules now more closely mirror their NFL counterpart. I think that's a net positive for the players and will be eventually. It's new stuff. It's like an iPhone update. Coaches are wired to hate this stuff. And Chip Kelly is also right, by the way. If you really wanted to affect meaningfully the total runtime of college football games, you would run fewer ads. But as we've seen and been reminded of over and over again this summer, money and TV runs the sport right now. That is the way it is. It's unfortunate in a lot of ways. This is just another one of them. Coming up next, though, let's get to a plea from somebody else to a teammate here on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. We have made it to week 1 of the NFL season, and GoJo and Golic is going to be live from Kansas City on Thursday from 4 to 7 p.m. Eastern, part of our Hurry Up House Party on DKN. Do not forget to tune into that. But guys, someone that you will not be seeing out in KC is Chris Jones, who has been holding out of training camp, says he's willing to miss half of the season. He is entering the final year of his contract, and he wants a new deal. And Travis Kelce is, well, he's freaking out, okay? He went on his podcast and made a public plea to Chris. He said, "Chris, can you please come back? You're really scaring me. I don't get it. You must know something I don't, because I just don't get it. I really want to get another Super Bowl ring with you, brother. This is me bargaining you to just come back and play football for the Chiefs. Please, we need you. We need you bad." So, guys, I think we can all agree that the only thing that is going to get Chris Jones back to the Chiefs is a new deal, no matter how many public pleas Travis Kelce makes on his podcast.
Yeah, Dad, this is actually a little bit surprising, and I know Travis is kind of doing this in jest. It's great podcast fodder. Season 2 in New Heights, very excited for those guys. But generally, this is a spot where players normally stay out of each other's financial business there, because what Travis is saying does skew in favor of the team and saying, just come back. And listen, he went on, him and Jason had the back and forth about this, and Jason sort of represented, Chris Jones's version of this, which is, hey, man, listen, I believe I'm worth a certain amount of money to this team. And, Dad, he said he's willing to sit out till week 8. I don't think it's going to take that long to see the Chris Jones-sized value in what's going to happen to that defense on the field if he's not out there.
No, I agree. And I do think he'll be out there at some point this season. Listen, we've chatted about this. He'll be out there. The key for him coming back is while you can try and get in shape, you can't get in game shape. So to be very careful with him after he signs, to work him back in so you don't get that soft tissue tear or pull that's going to linger and keep you out, because they really need him more for the last half of the season in the playoff run, of which they're going to be right there. That's all that really matters. And I think we all understand Travis, while in his heart wants him back, is messing around a little bit, because you're right. That is one of the top rules. You don't mess with another person's money. If they're doing what they feel they need to do, you let them do it, even though it's going to hurt the team. There is no doubt about that. So are they going to be in a position? We know they can already score a lot of points. Look what they did already this year. They kept 7 receivers as opposed to 5 last year in week 1. So even Patrick Mahomes said of you fantasy footballers out there, hey, sorry, but they're going to be spreading the ball out. So I don't know if you could pick just one guy to make up those points, outside of Travis Kelce at tight end. I don't see it being a big issue with him missing even if it's the first half of the season.
I was going to say, do you think that gives the team leverage over him in this spot? Because my thought would be, man, you probably do on one side if you're representing the team's interest. Hey, we know what we're built for is trying to get to the postseason, is trying to make sure we're maxed out then. But, Dad, Mahomes also hasn't played a road playoff game at this point. And if you're looking at the margins in the AFC right now, especially with the idea of the 1 seed in mind, Chris Jones is a guy that can absolutely tilt the balance of that because of what he's relied on for this defense. And I think opening night, we always see this, it's kind of a war waged through media more often than not. That's why you see reports leaked outside by teams. We've seen it go on with the 49ers right now and Nick Bosa to try and make the player look greedy, to try and make the player look like they're asking for too much. And I'm not saying that's happened with the Chiefs at this juncture. It seemed relatively civil outside of what Chris Jones has been trying to do here. Dad, the opening night of the NFL and a game that everyone's going to be watching, a primetime standalone game we know we react more harshly to, would be a great place, man, if the Lions all of a sudden run all over Kansas City and it's the difference of the game. That's going to lead every talk show Friday morning.
Yeah, it is. And I don't think you can have a knee-jerk reaction on either side. If they play well on defense, and Chris Jones, everybody could say, oh, Chris Jones, you better come in. Or if they play bad and management says, or people say management, you better give him what he wants. You can't knee-jerk it off of one game. But you do watch and see if there's a kind of trend going forward where it gets interesting for Chris Jones. This is the last year of his deal, right? So he needs the year to count. There's a reason he says you go in by week 8. You have to play or be on the roster for X amount of games during a year for the year to count for you. And that's what he needs. He needs this year to count So then he could be a free agent or get tagged, or unless he comes up with a new deal, whatever, but he's got to get this year to count. So that's when it could start to get iffy. The first couple of games, I know fans will really try and sway it one way or the other, but I wouldn't knee jerk it that early.
No, but that's advantage in favor of the player. If all of a sudden, for once, you can get fans on a player's side in a public negotiation between teams. What a novel concept. That's the bad side of the business right now for the Kansas City Chiefs. Jessie, let's celebrate some money coming out to a young guy in the league, though. Someone did finally get paid yesterday.
Yeah, Dallas Cowboys have no problem writing those checks. They have locked in their right tackle position for the foreseeable future. Terrence Steele getting a 5-year extension worth $86.8 million, including $50 million guaranteed, max value of $91.8 million. Now, Steele was entering the final year of his previous deal. He was set to be a free agent after the 2023 season. Guys, how do we feel about this? Like, it's a lot of money. Was this an overpay, or how do we feel?
This is right on time, baby. I saw someone post a clip. Zach Martin was walking down the hall when Terrence Steele had his press conference and just shouted, "There he goes. Big money." Terrence Steele, dad's one of the ones that feels extra cool. He was an undrafted free agent in 2020. He was thrust into a starting role, and really a lot of people looked at as the question mark, has become part of one of the best right sides of the offensive line in the NFL now with him and Zach Martin.
Oh, without question. And it always seems a little bit more too, doesn't it? If you get a first-round offensive lineman, they're going to get a lot of money right out of the gate, and the expectation is that they play well and get more money. And Zach Martin, a guy like that, has certainly lived up to it. He's going to be a walk-in Hall of Famer. But when it's an undrafted guy and nobody expects anything out of you, and then A, you make a team, B, you become a starter, and then C, you get paid, you know, like some of the top linemen, boy, that is such a great story for a guy like Terrence Steele, a success story of not supposed to be there, yet that's where he is. So that is a great right side of the line as they get ready to kick off. That's a game I'll be covering for Westwood One Sunday night at the Meadowlands against the Giants. I got to see Zach at the Notre Dame game this weekend. Notre Dame played Tennessee State, and Zach was there with his wife and a couple of the kids. And I walked up to him and I said, any former or current player was very happy for you for the fact that you didn't have to go through training camp, because that's everybody's dream, right? To be in position to where you're either making enough money, that much of a star, or in a position where you don't have to be in training camp and everybody is okay with it. He did what every player would love to be able to do.
That's living the dream, baby. That is living the dream, as is Terrence Steele now. We mentioned him getting pressed into duty early. He became just the 4th offensive tackle in the Super Bowl era and the 9th in league history to start 14 games as an undrafted rookie after injuries to La'el Collins and Cam Irving, his backup back then. And what he's made himself into since deserves a ton of credit for. And Dad, for the Dallas Cowboys now, they have smartly locked up the pieces on their offensive line, a group that they've actually been able to remake really well since their peak years in about, 2016, that 2014 to 2016 range, when you had Zach come over, you had him as the capstone of that offensive line. And now with Tyler Biadasz in the middle, with what we've talked about on that right side here, Tyron Smith and Tyler Smith on that left side, one of the more formidable groups in football that's going to be trying to block where Tony Pollard, Deuce Vaughn, and a running back room that's remade itself with Mike McCarthy calling plays again.
I'll tell you what I'm looking forward to. What have we talked about and we'll, I'm sure, talk more about this game as the week goes on, but what have we talked about all offseason? The running back situation. And we're going to talk with Austin Ekeler pretty soon about that from the Chargers as well, and about how the devalue of the running back position. And look what we're going to get this first game I talked about, I'll be covering, is the Giants and the Cowboys. The Giants will be running the ball with Saquon Barkley, and the Cowboys will be running the ball behind that O-line with Tony Pollard and Deuce Vaughn. So I think while you'll see obviously passing in this game, it's a passing league, you're going to see two teams that would love to be able to run the ball, as we've talked the whole offseason about no value for the running backs.
Yeah, we're going to find out very quickly the value of Mike McCarthy as the play caller with that in mind here. A lot of people in Dallas going to be waiting with bated breath to see. But coming up next, let's get to more of that running back conversation with Austin Ekeler next on GoJo and Golic. All right, very excited to welcome in Charger star running back Austin Ekeler, who joins the show now in game week. We have finally made it. So, Austin, I know we're excited, but what's the feeling for you now, man, going into year 7 of your NFL career, walking into week 1?
Yeah, as a guy going into year 7, it reminds me back when I was a rookie and I was looking at other guys going into year 7. I'm like, man, these guys been doing this for so long. And, once you get to this position and you've been playing for this long, really things start to slow down for you mentally. And now I can understand the game. Like coaches really, like my coach, Derek Foster, and I really see the game in a similar way as he's trying to coach you. I've been being coached on it for the past 7 years. So as far as production, I think it helps me just understanding now. It's like, can my body keep going, which haven't slowed down yet. So I'm looking for another big year, man.
I wonder, Austin, going back to when you were a rookie, you didn't come from a Power 5, you weren't drafted. I mean, so there's a lot of those guys that look at you going into your 7th year now and say, okay, he did that. I know I can do that. It gives us all hope. When was the point for you, rookie year, whenever, where you thought, okay, even though I wasn't from a big school or I wasn't drafted, I can play in this league?
Wow. It was tough for me because I was 6th string on the depth chart the entire training camp my rookie year. I did not move up the depth chart one time. And so you can imagine, like, hey, I'm trying to make the team. Like, I'm stressed out of my mind because I'm like, I'm not seeing any progress, because I'm not moving up the depth chart or anything like that. I was being consistent. I put in so much work to make sure that I knew what I was doing on the field because I wasn't getting a lot of reps. I get like maybe 2 or 3 reps on offense, a practice, but most of my reps came on scout team, special teams. And so that is where I was able to actually get some type of opportunity to show that I can play and run. But it wasn't really until the last preseason game when I pretty much kind of solidified my role by playing well on special teams and on offense, when I was like, you know what, like I feel like I did well for what I had.
What advice do you give young guys if and when they come and ask you for how you've been able to make it, how you were able to latch on? What do you tell them, whether it's undrafted or otherwise?
Yeah, great question. So for me, I treated it like my life depended on this opportunity. And that's what I tell these young guys coming. I say, dive into this like everything in your future depends on you making this team. Like, you're not going to get a lot of reps. So you got to make sure that you know every single play. So when you do get a rep, you're ready. And then when you get that rep, now you can start to build your reputation. So you need to overstudy. You need to go talk to the coaches. You need to be talking to the special teams coach, talking to the running back coach, getting extra time, making sure that you're overdoing the studying part so that you know exactly what to expect, what to come on the field. Because as a rookie, you're thinking. There's a lot of thinking going on, and you need to try to slow the game down for yourself mentally. And so if you can apply yourself in that way and treat it like this is everything, and when it's full time and it's full go, you give it everything you got, like your hair's on fire and, like they're trying to take something off your dinner plate. If you don't, then guess what? It's going to bring you into a new level. And for me, I was tapping into my survival instincts. Like, this is it. And so that's what I tell them. I tell them, I hope I can spark some fire in their ass, because if I can't, then it's probably not for them.
Boy, that is so true. I remember telling young guys, if you're getting 2 reps, try and do something in practice where now you're getting 4 reps or you're getting 5 reps, and show that coach that you deserve more reps. So 7th year for you, I got into the league in 85 and finished in the mid-90s. And the game changed even in those 10 years of preparation, workouts, nutrition. For you, from when you got in the league to now, what have been some of the changes, even in how you prepare for a year from when you first got in the league to now, and how it's changed?
Yeah, something personally that's like a little bit more, in my story. Like, my first 2 years, I used to crank some rock heavy metal music in my ears before practice and stuff. And this is when I was mainly special teams, so I don't need to know as much. Just go to run and hit, Yeah. But now I'm on offense a little bit more, and it's like, okay, I actually have to calm myself down, right? And so I need to make sure I can lock in and I can actually think and like see the coverages and the plays and understand what's happening. So that's been something that's changed internally for me. But also just, as you get older as a player, you take care of your body a little bit more. And, Coach Staley has done a great job with our team. We have an older offense right now, a bunch of guys that are, year 4 and past. And so Coach has done a great job of making sure that, hey, we're staggering out guys. Some guys are getting vet days, people that have been around 8-9 years. And so I think just preparation of how much toll you put on your body is what I've really seen change over the years. And now, we wear these guardian caps to protect our heads. So really a lot of the things that have changed have been around health and safety, which is a good thing for us.
Did you get a vet day? Have you gotten a vet day?
Nah, I haven't earned a vet day yet.
All right, we're gonna have to get on Staley about that, man. That's some bullshit.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing about being a running back. You know, there's 4 of us on the active roster, but there's only 1 on the field at a time. So your reps are already limited, so you don't need a vet day. You'll be good, you know.
Listen, first off, I have to ask, you mentioned the music. So what's the song now? What do you listen to get you in that calm Zen mind state if you're not blaring heavy metal now?
So now I'm no more music before the games. I am just straight self-talk. I get up and I visualize and I kind of pace back and forth. And I'm watching myself catch a swing pass from Herbert, right? I'm watching myself go through. And so I'm going through this and I have my helmet on. I'm fully strapped up and just pacing. It's like right before, like 10 minutes before, I'll just be pacing. I was even doing it in preseason games, man, because that's just like my routine. Like I wasn't even playing a preseason game, but I'm walking back and forth and it's just in that locker room, in that phase, I'm like, this is go time, you know? So that's what I do now.
So you didn't think it was strange then when you saw Kirk Cousins in another preseason game wearing his helmet with no pads on the sideline then? You're like, all right, I kind of get what he's going for here.
Exactly. Look, like, even though we're not playing, we're still a part of this team. We're still a part of this brotherhood. And so we feel the energy of game day, regardless if we're playing or not. And so I definitely get where Kirk Cousins was coming from.
So you mentioned Justin Herbert. He signs one of those quarterback deals. They get a ton of money. Has he taken all you guys out for dinner yet and picked up the tab?
Not yet. Those are coming though. We do it during season. Usually on Fridays is when we go out and get together. So it's coming.
Has the money changed him at all? I feel like no one on the outside really gets to know Justin. He's presented to us as a guy who's really, not a big talker, not really about himself. Has the money changed him around you guys at all yet?
I mean, he was still a first-round pick, so it's not like he didn't have money, now he's just got a lot more, and the checks haven't started flowing yet, so we'll see. I'm hoping he doesn't, though, or if he does, I hope it's for the better.
I hesitate always to say this. When I got drafted in 1985 in the 10th round, back when there were 12 rounds, my rookie year salary was $62,500. So it's the league has come a long way since then.
Well, it's taking people like yourself to help pave the way, man. So, much appreciated.
Oh, listen, it was, and guys before me as well. No doubt there's been a whole lot there. We've talked a lot about the running back stuff this offseason, but before we get into some of that, I want to take a different angle of it. They always talk about running backs and their age, and you're 28, but playing at the best you've ever played. But over the last 2 years, you've had, I think, 587 touches right in that area. And while we all want to be on the field playing all the time, is there a concern of running backs or a view to say, man, that many touches, while I know it's good and I'm doing well with it, can wear you down sooner than you want to be?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that a lot of teams are looking for, 2 people to be able to play that position at a high level, not just have one person that you're going to rely on, because we know this game is violent. And especially when you have the ball in your hands and you're not protected like a quarterback, you're going to be taking a lot of hits that, could potentially injure you. So the more you take, obviously, the more you're, up for the odds you are to get injured. And so, if you have, we have Joshua Kelly right now is our number 2 guy. And so it's like, look, we feel comfortable, both of us on the field making plays, and we honestly need each other so that we can make it the entire distance. It's something that I had back when I had Melvin Gordon and we were splitting carries, for 2 years there. And now, it's going to be the same thing with Joshua Kelly. And it's not anything against me. As a competitor, we want to be on the field, but also I have to not be, too buried into my ego and pride and be like, oh, I need to take every single rep and every single snap. Like, that's not what's going to help win in the end of the season, which is when it really matters. So no, I'm about it. I'm about having, multiple people at the running back position that can continue to play. And I also I think it helps with that conversation of the contracts, because if you got guys that are continuously making it through the season, that in that scenario, that person, hey, this person's been shown that they're durable, and that's something that plays a part into contract negotiations, as we've seen. So no, I think it's a great thing.
You mentioned that there, and listen, we've all got an ego. It's why we get to where we are, and you went to bat for not only yourself, but a lot of running backs. You were part of a lot of that conversation. Was that your biggest takeaway, or what was your biggest takeaway from what you went through, what you saw running backs across the league go through this offseason, and is it affecting the way you approach this season at all?
Yeah, my biggest takeaway, there's a few takeaways. It's not necessarily the biggest, but there's a few. One being that just as a player in general, we really don't like when we're restricted from getting to the open market, based off of artificial numbers that may or may not be your market value. I think we've realized that we don't like that, which is probably understandable. If you're producing like, nope, you can't go anywhere. Actually, you're going to take all the risk on a 1-year deal, and we're going to tell you what we're going to pay you, and you don't get any say in it. It's like, we don't like that. And then another thing I've realized is that the running back position, there's been a narrative around there. And the narrative is really, in a summary, I think, trying to compare our outliers, the guys that have really been playing at the top, and comparing them to the rest of the generalized running back narrative. And basically that's hindering our pay. Well, it's like, not that you're an elite player, it's you play running back. And so they're using that against us, not necessarily what our efficiency is on the field. And so that's another thing I'm taking away. And so for us, it's continue to, as running backs, it's continue to play, continue to make an impact. And guess what? Like, that's all we can do as players. And then when it comes to, CBA negotiations, things like that, we got to put things on the table. Hey, maybe this is something we want to fight for. Maybe it's not. And then, as running backs, we got to continue to play at a high level to continue to show, hey, we deserve to get paid. And that's what it's going to take. It's going to continue to take us making it through full seasons and playing at a high level.
And part of the shame of that is the CBA, for the length it goes, still goes a whole lot of years, is amongst your running backs or with your representatives or agents. Is there any talk of, can there be a separate thing done in the CBA for running backs? I mean, there have been so many things discussed, but we don't know what's actually feasible to try and do.
Yeah. And look, it seems like the running backs right now, and, I'm a running back, so people ask me about it, but this doesn't just happen to the running backs. It happened to the safeties. It happened to the tight ends. It even happened to the long snappers at one point. There wasn't necessarily franchise tag, but just they were getting shorted as far as contracts. And so it's like, these things pop up here and there, and they seem like little blurbs. And then whoever position group is affecting, it's like, oh, let's ask them all these questions. So I think it's a bigger issue of just, how our CBA is. And this is what it takes. It takes us as players to recognize this and decide if this is worth fighting for, and, put it on the table when it comes to negotiations for the next time.
You talked about production being at the heart of that. So let's look at, what's coming up this season for you. Kellen Moore comes over as your guys' offensive coordinator. You've dealt with coaching changes before, but what has Kellen Moore brought to this Chargers team so far in your guys' interaction this offseason?
Yeah, man, it's been so exciting watching our practices, and not just because of Kellen, but because of kind of the players that we have around. Man, it's been awesome. Like, we have Herbert now. Obviously, he's coming into his 4th year. Mike, Keenan, and I are coming into our 7th year playing together. Third or 4th year with Corey. Rashawn's coming into his 3rd year now. And so, like, Trey Pipkins, we've been playing with for 5 years. And so, Gerald for 3 years. So it's like, man, like, we are so connected on offense. And now you bring in Kellen, who's obviously had success with Dallas last year, and he's bringing his offense in here. So we got people making plays all over the place. We're throwing the ball around, getting checked out, all of it from top down, from deep balls to, the dink and dunk game to now, our emphasis is, in the run game is be better than 30th last year, which, is something that I'm a part of and directly affects me as well. And so, like, as far as what we're trying to attack, it's just more efficiency. Like, we have the tools, but now we have to make the tools come alive and actually put it on the field and put it together. And so it's like I said, it's been so much fun, because that's what this camp's been about. It's been, hey, let's go out there and make plays, and we're going to put pressure on you as an organization to do that. Literally, it's in my incentives to be better than 30th. Like, I have, like, hey, get this many yards, but then also be better than 30th. And so, like, I feel it and I like that. I'm like, yeah, put some pressure on me. Like, we'll take it. And so, as a competitor, that's what you're looking for. You want people to put pressure on you to try you, because, if they're testing you, that's exactly what you're looking for. You're looking to prove them wrong or prove yourself right. So I'm excited, man.
So, listen, team goals are the most important thing. You want to win the division. You want to make the playoffs. You want to win a Super Bowl. That's always the team goals every year. But last year, you rushed for the most yards you ever rushed for. You caught the most balls you ever caught in a year. Do you have individual or personal goals that you strive for each year?
Yeah, but it's never a benchmark. It's more of a philosophy. And the philosophy that I live by is continue to be consistent in the role that you currently have. And in that, you will be able to gain and then increase your role. So right now it's like, okay, look, I got to be this efficient ball catcher, got to be efficient running the ball, and then really efficient in the run game. Like, that's where I have to start again this year. I have to build off of what I've done last year. And so this has kind of been my philosophy every single year, starting back when I was a special teams player. Let's be effective in the role that I had as special teams. And then I started getting more offensive reps. And then I became the starter eventually. And now it's like I'm the starter. Now it's, okay, let's continue to be consistent. But now how can we be more efficient? So now it's been, in the red zone. Now I'm scoring a lot of touchdowns. So now it's coming back to, okay, Austin, we got to get this run game going. All right. Absolutely. I got to be consistent with what I did last year, but now the run game's got to be much more efficient. And obviously it's not just me, but I have to do my part in the whole ecosystem of the offense. And so that's my goal for this year, is to be consistent within this role, basically do what I did last year, but now let's see where we can continue to add onto that. And I know it's already in the run game, so that's where it's got to come from for me.
You mentioned the whole organization kind of feeling that, and the offense wanting to do that, but I think for everyone, Brandon Staley, your head coach, been one of the most talked about head coaches in football the last couple of years. Came in and was hyper aggressive in situations, got talked about last year for maybe some different decision making in some of those moments. What have you seen from your head coach now, as he's now getting further into his tenure with you guys as the head coach of the Chargers?
Yeah, I think he's been learning as well. His first year, we were going for it like crazy. Last year, not so much. So I think he learned a little bit there. And then, obviously.
Is that something, by the way, for you guys too? Because people always ask this question on the outside. When he's going for it like that, is that something you guys are drilling a lot in practice? Is that something you're aware of each and every week? Like, hey, this is going to be our philosophy? Or is that just game day situations dictating the flow for you guys?
Well, I guess this is kind of how it's set. Like, we know that he tends to be aggressive, so we're not surprised when we do go for it. It's not like we know every time we're going to go for it. But in certain situations, like if we're on the fringe between punting, and field goal, we're probably going for it. If we're in the 50-yard line, now we're probably going for it. Like if we're in the middle of the field, I'm not surprised if we're going for it at all, or even down in the red zone if it's early in the game. But yeah, he's definitely tapered back from that first year to last year, and then we'll see how it plays out this year.
We're all looking forward to it, man. Everyone should also be looking forward to, I know year 7 we talked about for you as a pro football player. As a professional talker and a podcaster, you got year 3 of Ekeler's Edge with you and Matt Harmon at Yahoo Sports. What's that? I mean, you've been one of the guys kind of at the forefront of this athlete-led media. You're really active on Twitch. So going into year 3 as a podcaster now officially, how's that felt for you? Especially fantasy football, since most guys used to always balk at the idea of playing fantasy or caring about fantasy.
So here's my thing with fantasy, man, that blows my mind, and I'm trying my best, but the fantasy football is a multi-billion-dollar industry that is played off of our game, right? The NFL, and we get zero kickback from that. Zero. Yeah. And so I'm like, there's got to be a way for us to legally, without jeopardizing the fundamentals of the game and the integrity of the league, for us to get something from this. And so I've been trying to dive into the community more, and that's why I do my podcast with Yahoo and talk about it, because I'm like, okay, let's use this as an opportunity to make endorsement. But there's got to be a way that doesn't always include like you have to be a podcaster or something like that. So I'm working on something right now. We'll see if we can get something in the works. But that's why I do all this media stuff, is because I'm trying to find short-term, fixes to tap into this value of fantasy, of the sports betting space, of just the Chargers, just the NFL, all of it in general. And so it's an opportunity for me to continue to leave my legacy. And, something I kind of live by when it comes to making an impact is your legacy will be whatever your fans remember you for. And so for me, if I only played football, then they'll only remember me as a football player. And that's fine if that's what I want. But I'm like, I want to continue to make an impact, not only for myself, but for my community. And so that's why I'm like, hey, here's me outside of football. Let's talk fantasy. Let's talk mindset. Let's talk, building businesses. Let's talk this type of stuff so that I can continue to build myself when my career's done and have something to build on then.
Well, that's all well and good. Deep down, do you want to be the pick over Christian McCaffrey in everybody's fantasy team, be the number 1 running back pick?
Look, I'm just going to say, I've been extremely consistent, over the past 2 years. Look, I'm not comparing myself to him. I'm just saying, here's where I am. I'm a touchdown scoring machine. There's going to be more of that coming this year. And when I get the ball in my hands, I'm pretty efficient, and I catch a lot of passes. So if you're in a PPR league, I mean, it's hard to pass up, and for the past, 2 years, I think 2 years ago, I was RB2 behind Jonathan Taylor. Last year was RB1. And so if we keep that trajectory going, then, I mean, yeah, well, sky's the limit at this point.
Listen, if you're within earshot of this show here and you don't take Austin Ekeler as your first pick and your first running back, you're making a huge mistake. We are all on board with this. Austin, thanks so much, man. Best of luck this week and all season long. Hopefully we get to talk to you again soon.
Thanks, boys. I appreciate you having me on.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. I'm Jessie Cofield. We just heard from Austin Ekeler, who has a really good mindset about the running back situation. Also, we might have to talk to him about partnering on the fantasy side, as long as we can still, pay out our players those very big prizes. So, guys, Ekeler's season outlook, everything, how'd you feel about what he said? He's a really good interview. He's a great guy to talk to.
He's a pro talker. You love to see it.
Yeah.
We've seen more and more players go down that road too. So it's not surprising, but he's definitely been one of the guys at the helm of that. Dad, I thought it was interesting the word he brought up describing what the Chargers offense wants to be, because I don't know if it's necessarily the word that most people think of this year with Kellen Moore and the hopes in mind. He said efficient. Explosive is the word that I think most people looking at the Chargers offense the last couple of years under Lombardi would say that's what was missing, the downfield passing game, making use of Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and now Quentin Johnston. But he went with efficient, which was a little surprising to me.
Me too, because we keep waiting for this offense, right? We keep waiting just to Herbert for throwing for all the yards he's thrown for and touchdowns he's thrown for, adding to the wide receiver arsenal, having Austin Ekeler in the backfield, who, oh, by the way, had just under 1,000 yards rushing and 107 receptions. So I think the expectation, and I get what he's talking about, efficient, but explosive, I think, needs to be a calling card for that Los Angeles Chargers offense as well. I know they needed to work on the defense some, but this is a scoring league now. So they seem to have the weapons to do it and to get it in chunks. Efficiency is great, but man, to have that big playability, that really can put a defense on its heels.
So we'll wait and see on that. But he mentioned, and he was right, that core of that offense. And I think the reason there's always so much optimism is because that core has been together a long time. They have a ton of really good players like Austin Ekeler in that core of players, it's just going to be the same question over and over again in perpetuity for the Chargers. Will they stay healthy long enough to be good? And we will wait to see that as we near opening night in the NFL coming up on Thursday. Again, we'll be live for the GoJo and Golic kickoff in Kansas City, fueled by Campbell's Chunky, ahead of the Lions and the Chiefs game there. We will get to take a look at more of the AFC West in the lead up to that too. Dad, let's circle back and put a bow, though, on college football. So much of the rest of this week is going to be about the start of the NFL season, week 1 there, and rightly so. But this college football week 1, in earnest, the beginning of the sport, started off with an absolute bang between Florida State going out and stomping LSU in the biggest matchup of the weekend, Colorado upsetting TCU, Duke beating Clemson last night, and a host of other things over the weekend. Dad, the Pac-12 became the first conference in the last 40 years to go 13-0 on opening weekend of the sport in their last year of existence. So I want to know from you, looking at this weekend, Dad, what feels the most sustainable to you? What is a blip on the radar versus what do you actually think is indicative of what we're going to see the rest of this season in college football?
One thing I say is not sustainable is the Oregon Duck doing 546 push-ups every week.
Man, my dog.
Like he had to do. Again, he does push-ups after every score, and they scored 81 points. So going up the ladder as you get to 81, 546 push-ups, that's not sustainable. Or he's going to have to start a cycle of something that's illegal for the players to do if he's going to be able to do that. As far as
that's probably already on test.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think, Mike, what we talked about early on is amazing. It still blows my mind that the Pac-12 is going to go away. There's just 2 teams left, Oregon State and Washington State, and I think they're going to end up in the Mountain West. Is the fact that it is the most competitive and maybe top-heavy from number of teams conference in the country. They had 5 preseason teams in the preseason rankings, from number 6 USC down to number 18 Oregon State, and Washington, Oregon, and Utah in between. And as you mentioned, they all won week 1, which is 12, and then USC won in week 0. So they're 13-0, you know, as a conference in what they've done, have not lost yet. Throw Colorado in there. Again, I'm not saying to win the conference, but to all of a sudden, are they going to be a player in what was thought to maybe be a walkover for some teams this year? Now going to be one hell of a game with Colorado, with them possibly upsetting some of these teams. So there's not another conference with that depth of preseason rankings the way they are and where these teams are all winning so far. So, and this conference is going to be gone. It's going to be gone. But USC is putting up numbers with Caleb Williams. Washington put up numbers with Michael Penix Jr., quarterback. They're doing what they're supposed to do. Utah, with their tough defense, they're living up. But we always wait for them to chew each other up, right? They end up knocking each other out of contention. So we'll wait to see that again. But there's a number of them right now, and we keep getting to the last few weeks of the season, and they keep, eating their own.
Well, I think that's the big worry again now as you look at the month of November slate. And the cool part for football fans is all those teams are going to play. The bad part for the Pac-12 is all those teams are going to play. Like deep down in places you don't want to talk about at parties, I'm sure George Kliavkoff, who said leaving the big meetings of college football playoff folks, that we want to have one of our teams win the national championship. That'd be a lot easier if they weren't all so good and all playing each other, and that's exactly what's going to happen. So I'm with you. That depth seems very real. A big shout-out, by the way, you mentioned Oregon State, the lowest ranked of the Pac-12 teams going in. Maybe not for long, man. DJU has to feel very vindicated. Not only, and listen, I'm sure he's got plenty of friends on that Clemson team last night, but again, maybe in secret, might have felt a little validated as he went out this weekend and threw for 3 touchdowns, ran for 2 more, and helped Oregon State beat San Jose State in their first game of the season, and then watched his Clemson team that he was a part of last year and got blamed for a lot of what went on there, some of which was on his shoulder, some of which wasn't. Now gets to go and see that in the rearview mirror. Got to feel pretty good for him this morning. Dad, I think the stuff a lot of people are going to look at, right, and probably overreact to. We're going to spend a lot of time on Clemson and LSU because Clemsoning was a thing for so long under Dabo Swinney, and you saw that word coming back in last night because Brian Kelly, who I saw per ESPN Stats and Info, has now the 3rd most losses by 20 or more points as the head coach of an AP top 5 team. He was 5 has 5 of those in just 37 games. The only coaches with more are Joe Paterno and Woody Hayes, who each coach over 100 games with a team ranked in the top 5. So the big game problem that we know was lumped on Notre Dame for a long time and still exists there has followed Brian Kelly to LSU. But, Dad, I think for both of those teams, for Clemson and for LSU especially, you played a really good team in Florida State to start the season. You played it in a really tough environment. And so I think that's still going to be a team that is a very good and competitive team in this year's SEC that has a lot of new in it, but might fall short of what I think now is the standard there in LSU. Coming off an SEC championship appearance in year 1 for Brian Kelly, Dad, is it feels like national championship or bust in Louisiana right now for this team. And I don't think at this point, based on what we saw and based on what we know about this team from last year, I don't think it's a national championship team just yet.
No, I agree. And that was the thought process, right? Even after they lost this exact game last year, closer, the blocked extra point, they lost just by 1 point, but they did end up going to the SEC championship game against Georgia. They did beat Alabama. So it went some good ways for them. And that's something that Brian Kelly can hang on himself and hang on the coaches and hang on the players. Look, we were in this position last year and we reached the championship game. So that's something they have, but it doesn't seem like they're as good, but again, it's week 1. It's week 1. So we have to let it play out a little bit longer.
Yeah, we do. And I think it's worth remembering in that game, that was a 1-score game with 11 minutes left in the 4th. It spent the lion's share of that game before the floodgates came off at the end. Dad, for Clemson and Dabo, also a little bit more existential. That one, though, too, I think you look the way they lost that game. Multiple fumbles inside the 10, multiple block kicks. I just don't think that's stuff that you can count on overall. I still think Clemson is going to be a big tough out in the ACC, but this does feel like a trend of the decline of this team in terms of the personnel at key positions like quarterback and wide receiver that for so long have been the calling card. They want to try and be a rushing team under Garrett Riley. That's just never who Clemson's been. The offensive line has never been the strength of the program. While you've got Will Shipley and Maffa in that backfield, who are probably 2 of your best offensive weapons, I don't know if they're built to live that way just yet. This is going to require a lot of growth from Cade Klubnik at quarterback over the season and Garrett Riley getting more comfortable, which I'm still willing to bet on. I'm not willing to write Clemson off. If you ask me, I would probably want to do over on my pick for them to make it over FSU to the playoff, but we'll have to wait for that another day. And instead, get ready to bring on the beef to this show. Let's get a Hall of Famer in next on GoJo and Golic. GoJo and Golic here on DraftKings Network. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jessie Cofield. Hoping to talk to the Hall of Famer Walter Jones in just a couple of moments here on behalf of a really important initiative that he's involved with the NFL that we certainly want to highlight. But, Dad, we had so many big moments happen in college football this week. And I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't get updated on the ones that are a little more personal to all of us around here on the show. From me, you, and Brandon, Notre Dame currently sits at 2-0. They're getting ready for their first real test coming up this weekend against NC State on the road in Raleigh. That'll be a great one there. Sam Hartman, Brennan Armstrong, guys familiar with each other after a lot of ACC battles. But Notre Dame takes care of business against Tennessee State at home. First FCS team to ever visit. First time Notre Dame's played an HBCU. Seeing Eddie George there. All really cool things. But we got to do a check-in, a wellness check on our buddy out there in Boston. Proud Boston College alum, or maybe not so proud this morning, Jessie Cofield. Jessie, how we feeling, bud, after whatever the hell happened against NIU this weekend? You guys cut $1 million check, and you're only supposed to do one and not the other, right?
Yeah, a couple of 3-9 teams from last year having a real barn burner. I mean, look, it was embarrassing. What are we doing with our quarterback situation? It felt like every 5 minutes we were subbing in between Moorhead and Castellanos, so they got to figure out what's going on there. I will say, the offensive line looked pretty competent. Rarely were there those quarterback errors due to pressure on the QB. It was just our quarterbacks not being able to do much. So, yeah, and I say quarterbacks because who's gonna play quarterback? I don't know at this point. But yeah, it was pretty embarrassing. Pretty embarrassing that we paid for the pleasure of losing that game. But I mean, God, I'm trying to when I was at BC, it still wasn't the gold. I remember the year after I graduated, we played USC in a night game and we won. And it was the biggest thing that had happened at BC in years. So yeah, gone are the days of Doug Flutie. We had Luke Kuechly for a while. That was fun. But now, I don't know, guys. It's kind of just embarrassing.
Man, living in the past, aren't we, Jessie?
It's all I have. It's all I have.
Yeah, it's tough to see.
They should make you now. Listen, we're not completely clean in this. Last year, didn't we give a check to Marshall to come into Notre Dame and beat us as well?
Listen, man, only a fool trips over what's behind them, so I have wiped that from my memory.
Okay, they should make. What would be cool would be after that loss if BCU had to present the check to NIU right after the game.
Oh God!
Here you whooped us, and here's $1 million check as well.
We present to you.
One of the big checks.
Yeah.
One of the
Give
big
me one
checks.
of them big ones. I don't care.
Yeah, it was bad.
Forget relegation and all the rest of those ideas. As far as doable, feasible opportunities in college football, that is one we absolutely need to do. If your team loses, you have to present the big cardboard check on the field after the game to the money team that's coming into your stadium. Upon this rock, we will run for commissioner of college football going forward. Daddy, I mean, it is an exciting time for Notre Dame if you look at what's already changed around their odds. We talked about with so many of the upsets this weekend. In the Heisman Trophy race, Caleb Williams, the defending Heisman Trophy winner, had already started with the best odds. Jaden Daniels, the quarterback for LSU, was second in the Heisman odds going into this season. Now, that has changed drastically. I think he's dropped down somewhere well below that, tied for 17th. Let me pull the numbers up. Yeah, so Jaden Daniels started the season second in the Heisman odds. He's now tied for 15th at this point here. Cade Klubnik also we can expect to drop. He was up at tied for sixth best odds with J.J. McCarthy and is now worse than Keon Coleman at plus 6,000. We've seen Sam Hartman jump up to, I believe, tied for fourth best Heisman odds here. And for Notre Dame, this is going to be their first big test on the road against an NC State defense that's sure of itself under Dave Doeren, and against a quarterback in Brennan Armstrong, who's reuniting with the coordinator in Robert Anae, who he was with during his best season at Virginia. And I feel like this is where the veteran status of Sam Hartman's going to come into play, as well as anything, Dad, is being able to, one, communicate to this team, hey, I know these guys, I know what they're about, and I know what they can do to us, and holding that standard through this week of practice.
Yeah, you can talk about, listen, Sam Hartman has been great. 6 touchdowns, no interceptions, completing over 82% of his passes. And I know you're just talking about the teams you played, and it's Navy and Tennessee State, but that defense has not given up a touchdown. Notre Dame has been, in the past, guilty of playing down to the level of their opponent. they've blown out both teams they should blow out, and they haven't given up a touchdown. So I'll go from the defensive side there.
Yeah, no, the defense has a lot to write home about. I think I saw the first time they've held two teams to start a season without a touchdown since the 70s or so.
Yeah.
So going to be very interested to see how that goes. But Dad, why don't we go from college to pro here and get ready to talk to one of the best to ever do it, a guy I always enjoyed watching growing up, Walter Jones, the 2014 Hall of Famer, former Seahawks great, here with us today, and here with us on behalf of a really great cause in 96 Check. Walter, we appreciate you joining us this morning. Can you tell us about 96 Check? Because reading about this and what you and the NFL are promoting here is incredible.
Yes, thanks you guys for having me on. It's something that I just wanted to remember Cortez Kennedy, a player that I played with at Seattle, kind of mentored me, kind of showed me how to be a professional outside the game of football. So when he passed away here, probably 8 years ago, for me personally, I think you always try to find things that can you can keep his memory up. And when I went to the funeral, when I met family and friends, you know, the one thing they said about Cortez was he always would check in on you. You know, I thought it was just me sometimes. You know, when you hear from, you know, not just players, but you hear from family and friends. So I wanted to do something to remember him. And I just realized that that's what he used to do for me, is check up on me. So I just wanted to let former players, a lot of times we get so caught up in our busy life that sometimes we forget those people and stuff like that. So on 9-6 was jersey number. That's where I got the 96 check. So every year I try to ask everybody to check in on loved ones, you know, former players, everybody, just to check in. A lot of times that can help anybody out there that's in need. And so now with the 96 check and with the NFL, what we do now is just want to check on those guys. I always tell those guys, if I can't help you, I know somebody else, somebody that can help you, or I have a connection, or somebody have a connection. So you just want to reach out to those people and make sure you haven't forgot them. And, you know, we all from different walks of life, but still, again, we be together so much as a football team and as players. And sometimes once we leave the game, we forget about those players. So on 9-6, September the 6th, I just put out, you know, a media blast and just let everybody know to check in on those people. Just a phone call can change somebody, change their mind or their thoughts.
But that is a great thought, Walter, because, you know, fans just watch us play on Sundays and think, you know, we're robot players, you know, not human beings. And we have to remember that's exactly what we are with you know, the mental side of it as well. So that's a great initiative that you have going on. As far as your old team, the only team you played for started every game. You were there, 180 of them with Seattle. What are your thoughts on them going forward? A little surprised last year with Geno Smith and the season he had. So expectations can be pretty high now.
Oh, definitely high. You know, I think last year was one of those years where you thought that was going to be like a rebuild year. But Geno had been there for so long. He understand. I think a lot about Geno in the quarterback play. He plays just like the coach want him to play. You know, put the ball where it needs to be. Don't put the ball in danger. And then let the defense win the game. And I think last year they kind of showed that. And then they showed that by how they support Geno by signing him to a big deal to let him know that he's the quarterback. And I think we're bringing Bobby back. You know, you put a veteran guy. I'm a big fan of having veteran guys there to help those younger guys come along and can't help those guys to understand the standard, what it takes to win in this league. So from that standpoint, and a lot of the draft picks, you know, offense, I think it's going to be great. We got a great running back in Kenneth Walker that have definitely got the job done. So I'm looking forward to some great things to happen this year. I know the division, it's not as tough as it used to be, but I think still, again, I think Seattle is probably the team to beat in this division this year. It's just a matter if they can put it on the field and do just as good as they did last year.
Got a couple of young tackles that they hope can turn out as well one day as Walter Jones did for them so many years ago. Well, unfortunately, time restriction-wise, we got to let you go here. But again, 96 check. Everyone, make sure that you check this out. Check in on your people. Do right by that. Again, 9-6 in honor of Walter's late teammate. Walt, we appreciate everything so much. Thank you. And hopefully we'll get to talk to you again longer soon.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it.
And Dad, you know this, and he's absolutely right. Unfortunately, both of us have lost teammates, and a lot of them far too soon. And that little bit of reaching out can go such a long way for guys.
Huge. Huge.
Again, big thank you to Walter Jones on that, and appreciate him joining us. Coming up next, let's celebrate one of my former teammates and a big life moment yesterday. Next here on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. We are so excited about this week because GoJo and Golic will be live from Kansas City on Thursday from 4 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time, fueled by Campbell's Chunky Soup for our Hurry Up House Party. Tune in live, like I said, 4 to 7 p.m. Eastern, right before the game. Now, fellas, that is going to be a lot of fun, and we love Campbell's Chunky Soup.
We do. We love the chunky around here on this particular program, especially. But we also love the bright lights, and we're going to get to some star-studded names as we finish off the show with this, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to end the day. As always, download, subscribe, rate, review. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Check us out live on DraftKings YouTube and DraftKingsNetwork.com, as well as Samsung TV Plus. And before we get to the bright lights, something that might help with those, our friends at Knockaround Sunglasses. They've been here since day one. They have helped us build this thing, so support them the way they have supported us. Get the best high-quality polarized sunglasses in the business at a price that's not going to break your bank. We're getting ready for the home stretch of Major League Baseball season. They got the first 9 teams of their MLB collection in there. These things are durable. They are fun. They're going to make your game day outfit look phenomenal. So head to knockaround.com. Get great-looking shades that start at just $28 and use code GOLIC at checkout to get yourself free shipping on that order. Dad, let's get to this, that, the third, and those bright lights that we mentioned. Inter Miami, which has been the story of MLS since the acquisition of Lionel Messi, made its way to LAFC. And so Miami and Los Angeles get together. And good God almighty, the guest list is swole. And you look at who was coming out for this one, Dad. Unbelievable names that made the trip out to see Messi, as everyone's been looking at the hottest ticket in sports. You have got Mookie Betts, Connie Britton, Leonardo DiCaprio, James Harden, Tom Holland, Will Ferrell, Liam Gallagher, Selena Gomez, LeBron James, Clayton Kershaw, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, Nas, Ed Norton, Glenn Powell, Rage Against the Machine. Dad, at this point, if you were in Los Angeles and not at that game, I can't imagine how embarrassing this is for, oh God, I'm describing myself.
Yeah. Jason Sudeikis was there as well. Owen Wilson was there. Caleb Williams was there, the quarterback for USC.
Cool to see USC players being stars again around Los Angeles. That's when you know the program's back.
Completely agree. And a celebrity list is incredible for a game when they have to, usually it's by stardom, who's at the top of the list. There were so many stars, they just went alphabetical order. I mean, that's how many people showed up. They had to go alphabetical order on this thing. Absolutely incredible. That's what Messi has done. I mean, Messi's just coming into our country, scoring goals all over the place, helping Miami win their games, and now everybody's following it. I mean, it is making the MLS really, really cool.
Also, if you look at the list of notable attendees, something that kind of cracked me up was Prince Harry and Meghan Markle don't have any type of an occupation next to their name. Like, there's occupations next to everyone's names, and they were just like, goes without saying.
You know what it says? It should say, we're royals.
Yes, right?
Yeah.
Former.
It's like The Bachelor and Bachelorette, where you've got to make up these weird lower thirds to try and, give a nice euphemism for the weird job that they do or don't have at that particular point. By the way, very excited for the Golden Bachelor coming up soon. Apropos of nothing, I cannot wait to see all these grown folks out here playing a kid's game. It is going to be fantastic stuff. Dad, I feel like Golden Bachelor might be up your alley here. Get to your age range.
You looking forward to 70-year-olds making out on camera, Mike? Is that what you're looking forward to?
Hell yeah, brother.
Looking forward to the fantasy suites. We're gonna need some new hips after this, baby.
I don't want to know what the fantasy suite's going to have in it to help out.
Probably a lot of Tylenol, maybe like a guardrail or something.
Yeah,
I don't know
what I was thinking.
also true.
Not an ad, but could be.
I don't think those are greenies in that bowl. Might be a different color. Mercy. Let's get us from one emergency to another and get to that. This, we are steadily and quickly becoming the poop show here.
We are.
And so we feel the need to inform you of this crappy situation. A Delta flight was forced into an emergency landing by a passenger's violent diarrhea. This flight from Atlanta to Barcelona had to turn around and make that landing after the passenger, quote, had diarrhea all the way through the plane. 2 hours into a transatlantic flight from Georgia to Spain, the pilot said, quote, "This is a biohazard issue. Dad, is it a point of pride or the greatest shame of your life if you have a bowel movement so fierce you are deemed a biohazard? You are a chemical weapon now."
You know, we talked about this when we played the one podcast where the dude had to run out of the chair because, you know, we think he pooped himself.
He had an Irish breakdown.
Yeah, and he said he had leg cramps. Yeah, that was pretty funny. This, I don't think you want to, you know, you don't have a choice but to own it. No, I don't think this is a feather in your cap. When you read diarrhea all throughout the plane, I mean, what the hell happened? Did this person try and run to the bathroom and it just was coming out all the way down? I mean, I can't imagine. I can't imagine the plane, because if he or she made it to the bathroom, there's no issue. I mean, my God, I'm just trying to paint the picture of what went on that plane.
What really horrified me was reading that, you know, they had to bring the plane back to Atlanta. They had to make an emergency landing. The passengers were transferred to another plane. They went off on their way. And then the plane, the diarrhea biohazard plane, was thoroughly cleaned and then put back out on the roster. So, like, next time you get on a plane, you just don't know. You don't know what you're sitting in, because, I'm sorry, thoroughly cleaning it, like, I'm short of ripping out the carpeting and stuff.
Yes. Could you imagine? Because we all seen it when we go off the plane. The cleaning people are getting ready to come on the plane.
Oh man!
And they're getting ready to pull up some wrappers or napkins or things like that. They had to go on that. I would go on there and go, hell no, not happen. Turn around and you go get a biohazard team to go in and take care of this one.
I mean, those people, hazard pay. There's not enough of it in the world here. They needed, I was expecting those full-blown hazmat suits walking into that experience. The thing I want to know is, and I'm hesitant to ask this, but at GoJo and Golic on Twitter, if you see something, say something. Because I'm surprised in the year of our Lord 2023, not a picture or a video has come from this flight experience so far. And you'd imagine someone had to be rolling on this on that plane, because we've all had to go to the bathroom on the plane. Hell, we've all been sick on the plane before. I don't know what set of circumstances for an adult. And the identity hasn't really released, so maybe it was a baby. I don't know. Maybe some baby, and we hope the baby is okay if that was the case. But somebody, identity remaining nameless, had one of the more explosive experiences on a plane that we've ever seen involving a bowel movement. So I'm curious if someone documented this.
I think what would happen if you heard all over the plane, you got to wonder if somebody was maybe trying to roll on the camera, but it was right by them and they were rolling going, oh, you know, you start to get your own gag reflex kicking in. If all of a sudden you see diarrhea all over the plane, I can't even fathom this.
Well, the fact that we don't have video evidence leads me to believe that it was either a child or an elderly person. Like, that there's a reason that people on the internet have not put this on the internet yet, because it would be, you know, not
in
nice.
Poor taste.
Yes, in poor taste to do so.
So let's finish off in better taste then here.
Yes.
And wish happy trails and a welcome to the dark side to our good friend and former NFL tight end now Kyle Rudolph, who announced his retirement yesterday. The two-time Pro Bowl tight end is going to go back week 3 to be honored by the Minnesota Vikings, where he will retire as a member of that team. Also spent time with the Giants and the Bucks, caught Tom Brady's last touchdown pass in the NFL, Dad, and has been a guy that, since we know him, met day one as 17 and 18-year-olds, knew this is what he was destined for. Always said he wanted to be a guy that played darn near 15 years in the NFL, and he got incredibly close to that. An unbelievable career, an almost universal Walt Payton Man of the Year nominee during his time with the Vikings. All-around great dude. Pumped for him.
Yeah, hell of a career. 482 receptions, over 4,700 yards, 50 touchdowns. Most of that career in Minnesota has made an impact off the field in Minnesota at the Children's Hospital as well. And he and his wife Jordan have really gone out, you know, public and helped out a lot of people. And that's really a cool thing. Well, all your friends too, they have 4 kids. All your friends have so many kids. I ran into Braxton Cave and Trevor Robinson, Tyler Eifert, Zach Martin at the football game. Everybody's got kids. I'm used to seeing all you guys as like 18-year-old freshmen with these young faces, and now y'all have a bunch of kids walking around. But congrats to Kyle on a hell of a career.
And a new member of the media now as well here. Looking forward to seeing Rudy behind the mic. Looking forward to you downloading, subscribing, rating, and reviewing. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.